Good evening. This is Weekdays with Wendy, and I'm reading from the Love Your Neighbor, No Exceptions daily flip calendar. And today is a scripture from Hebrews chapter 10, verses 23 through 25. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. Last week, we experienced some bizarre weather here in Oklahoma. It was some of the coldest temperatures I know that I had ever experienced in the state. And not only was it cold, we saw a great deal of snow, and it didn't melt away the first day we had it, as typically happens in Oklahoma. And the temperatures were just so bitter cold, and for a longer stretch of time than most people can remember. The combination of the deep snow, the bitter cold, made for just a crazy week with unexpected complications. We had problems with electricity and water, and it just was a strange week. Well, one of the things that I noticed one morning last week, I looked out our front window again to check on what was going on with the weather, and I saw that a flock of robins had descended upon our home. They were covering a tree in the front yard and lining up the eaves, and these robins, because it was cold, they were all puffed up. Their feathers were kind of puffed up to give them extra insulation against the cold. Well, I'd never seen anything like that. I mean, there were so many of them, and I'd never seen robins flock together like that. And I was concerned that would they be able to survive since it was so cold. It was just a few degrees above zero, and the wind was howling. And so I went on the internet, and I discovered that when the weather gets extremely cold, robins are one of the few birds that really can handle it. They are able to find water by eating snow, although that's not their preference. Apparently, this researcher knew the robins, but they can eat the snow, and they change their diet. Typically, they eat insects and worms, but because those aren't available to them in frigid cold weather, they will start eating berries. And so they change their diet. The other thing they do is they change their behavior. They aren't social birds, but when it turns frigid cold, they do become social. They start to flock together. And flocking together helps protect them against predators. It's all the more little eyes to see where food and water resources can be obtained. But they flock together, and when they huddle together on the branches or along fence lines, they get warmth from one another. And as I was watching all of them, I thought it was a really apt analogy for us that when the circumstances in our lives turn cold, we should turn toward each other. We should seek out fellowship. We should flock together for protection, for resources, for warmth. It reminded me of this Bible verse. Let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another. And so I hope that you would seek out fellowship in all the ways that we can do right now, encourage one another on toward love and good deeds. Have a great evening.